Hajde da pričamo o najvećem fudbalskom događaju, svjetskom prvenstvu. Ovaj put održat će se u Kataru, maloj bliskoistočnoj naciji koja je izgradila mnogo toga da ponudi vrhunski ugođaj sportistima i njihovim fanovima. Ali Katar se suočava i s mnogo kritika, uglavnom na račun ljudskih prava i tretiranja radnika migranata. Kolegica Sandra Gatman obišla je stadione i drugu infrastrukturu izgrađene za ovaj mega događaj. Evo svega što trebate znati o tom takmičenju.
Let's talk about the biggest football tournament in the world, the FIFA World Cup.
And it's happening right here in Qatar.
More than 1 million football fans are expected to travel to this tiny Gulf nation for what's going to be a World Cup of many firsts, including the first to be hosted in the Middle East.
It's a great event for my country. As a Qatari, I'm very proud.
I'm so excited that people are coming to Qatar to actually experience it.
And Qatar has built so much new stuff to make it all happen. 7 stadiums, a new airport, more than 100 hotels, new highways, and a new metro.
The total bill is coming in at something like $200 billion, making this the most expensive World Cup ever, by a long way. We've basically seen an international city emerge out of the desert.
But it's also a World Cup that's come in for a lot of criticism, especially over human rights issues and Qatar's treatment of the migrant workers who've built everything.
Host country Qatar is facing growing criticism over its treatment of women, migrant workers, and the LGBTQ+ community.
The team from Australia is out with a video today that condemns the country's human rights record.
I believe a lot of the criticism is unjust. I feel like people have used this as a way just to be able to bring Qatar into disrepute. Qatar is a welcoming and hospitable country. There's nothing that fans should be worried about. All we have to do right now is just to show the world what an amazing World Cup this will be.
This country has been looked at, pored over, scrutinised for 12 years. I think there's also a real kind of determination from the organisers to prove the world wrong.
So we're going to take you through some of the basics about Qatar, explain some of the controversies behind this World Cup, and tell you what to expect from the tournament. So I'm in Doha, Qatar's capital and its only major city. Qatar is a desert peninsula in the Gulf. It's got only one land border, that's with Saudi Arabia. Dubai and Iran are also nearby. They're just across the water. And Qatar is tiny. It takes roughly 2 hours to drive from top to bottom.
Nearly 3 million people live here, but only 380,000 are actually Qatari nationals. Everyone else has come here from all over the world to work in all sorts of jobs.
But a lot of what you see in Qatar today, like most of these buildings, it just wasn't here even 20 years ago.
If we go back even further, around 100 years, Qatar's biggest industry was pearl diving. But in the 1930s, they struck oil, and then in the 70s, they discovered natural gas. Today, Qatar has the 3rd biggest gas reserves in the world. And that enormous wealth has been used to transform the country.
There is a huge change, a huge difference between 40 years ago and now today. And I remember in 2000s, 2001, 2003, if anybody asked me, where are you from? And I say, I'm from Qatar. They ask me another question, where is Qatar? What is Qatar? Now, they just ask me how it's look like, what is, if we visit Qatar, what do we need, how it's the culture. The profile is growing dramatically, and and Qatari government has succeeded actually in establishing themselves on the world map.
Now, on the political front, Qatar is not a democracy. Like its neighbors in the Gulf, it's a monarchy, and the emir essentially runs the government. Right now, that's Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. But it was his father, the previous emir, who really kick-started Qatar's super-fast growth.
Sheikh Hamad came with a new vision and mission in his mind, and he wanted to develop the country, whether in education, in healthcare, in media, in culture, in sports. Qatar actually uses those as tools in its soft power.
But it's not just soft power. Qatar's also tried to position itself as an important political player, for example, by mediating between groups fighting in countries like Sudan and Afghanistan.
Well, I think there's a few different goals that go back to a bigger strategy over the last kind of 25 years or so, really thinking about the country as trying to solidify for itself a kind of a reputation on the international stage.
And the ultimate expression of Qatar wanting to be this big global player is hosting the World Cup.
The 2022 FIFA World Cup is Qatar.
What was it like when Qatar first got the bid?
I was over in Zurich for the announcement at the FIFA headquarters in 2010. The bid had started in 2009. Very much seen as an outsider bid. There was so many things against it: the size of the country, the weather, the perceived absence of a football culture here. So I think when Sepp Blatter pulled out Qatar from the envelope, the whole footballing world was just in a state of shock.
While over in Qatar, people went wild. Since then, a lot has happened. There were years of corruption scandals at FIFA, world football's governing body.
The FIFA scandal rumbles on.
7 people were now arrested, top members of FIFA's board.
And Qatar, along with Russia, which hosted in 2018, was accused of essentially buying its winning bid. It's something that Qatar has always denied.
We haven't seen anything definitive proving that that process was, was corrupted, but certainly the questions being there, I think, already, cast certain doubts, I think, in the minds of a lot of people.
There's another shadow hanging over this tournament, and that's the issue of labor rights and the working conditions for the tens of thousands of people brought in to do all the construction, many of them from countries in South Asia and Africa.
Because Qatar, like other Gulf countries, relies almost entirely on foreign workers.
They play a key part of making Qatar's dream to host this World Cup possible, and yet they were governed by this very problematic system. The system created an over-dependence of migrant workers on the employer or the sponsor. So this created this power imbalance that actually drove labor abuse and exploitation in the country and across the Gulf region.
Things like not being allowed to change jobs or leave the country without their employer's permission, not getting paid, and working in unsafe conditions and in extreme heat. And workers have died during all the construction linked to the World Cup, but the number of deaths is heavily disputed. Now here's what Qatar's Supreme Committee, the organizers of the World Cup, told us in a statement. Despite our commitment to our rigorous standards, it is unfortunately the case that, as elsewhere in the world, work-related injuries and deaths still occur on our projects, and there have been 3 work-related fatalities and 37 non-work-related deaths. But a report last year by the UN's International Labour Organization suggests a more complicated picture, one that goes beyond just World Cup construction projects. It found evidence of 50 fatal occupational injuries in Qatar in 2020 alone, mostly in the construction industry and mostly workers from Bangladesh, India, and Nepal. The ILO says it's hard to get accurate numbers because of gaps in the data. They point to different institutions in Qatar categorizing and investigating work-related deaths differently. So for example, there is a concern on whether a large number of workers' fatalities are caused by heat stress, and whether these are not being properly identified as work-related. At the same time, the ILO and rights groups like Amnesty International also say that Qatar's government has done a lot to improve things, including reforming the sponsorship system so that workers can now change jobs or leave the country without having to ask for permission.
I don't think any country can claim to have done as much as Qatar has done in the past 10 years to improve the working conditions living standards, the introduction of minimum wage. Qatar has been a trailblazer in the region.
There are, certain legitimate criticisms to be raised, and at the same time, there are some that we've seen from some segments and corners of the media and other international audiences that have tended to veer a little bit toward a kind of very racialized way of looking at Qatar, or kind of an Orientalist way of thinking specifically about Qatar as if it exists completely outside of a very troubling kind of international labor system that is quite exploitative.
The Qatari government has said that the World Cup has been an important catalyst for improving workers' rights. Do you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I think the spotlight that was brought by this World Cup pushed the Qatari government to at least commit to this reform process. And up until 2017, there was a bit of a denial that there is an issue. In 2017, we saw a shift in the political will, that the government really kind of adopted this reform process. So the principles are in way better shape now, but this implementation, ending this culture of impunity, ensuring that employers are respecting the law and migrant workers are fully protected from labor abuse and exploitation, that's where some gaps remain.
And it's not just labor rights. The World Cup has also drawn attention to other rights issues in Qatar. For example, homosexuality is criminalized here, and that's been a big focus of criticism.
Concerns are growing that Qatar is not doing enough to ensure the safety of LGBTQ+ fans.
Some of the teams have raised the issue, and the German and English captains say they'll wear rainbow armbands in support of the LGBTQ community. The message from FIFA is to focus on the football, and Qatar's organizing committee says everyone will be welcome.
I reiterate the message of Qatar being a safe country, a hospitable country, and I am confident that anybody that comes to Qatar is going to feel welcome and safe.
Most World Cup tournaments are spread across several cities, but this one is super compact. All 8 stadiums are either in Doha or within an hour's drive. So if you wanted to, you can go to more than one match in a day.
But with all the fans concentrated in this small area, it's going to be a huge operation to make it all run smoothly. Will there be enough accommodation? Will the traffic be gridlocked? Will the new metro be able to handle the crowds? Then there's all the new entertainment they've prepared. 2 newly built islands with rides and restaurants and a huge water park. They're bringing in big names for 3 music festivals, and there will be lots of fan zones.
So right now, this is obviously a massive construction site, but imagine this packed full of football fans.
Fan zones will be among the designated areas where people can buy and drink alcohol. Alcohol will also be sold within the stadium perimeters before and after matches, but it won't be allowed in the stands. All this is a change from Qatar's usual rules around alcohol. Normally, visitors can only buy it in some hotel bars and restaurants. It's also illegal to be drunk in public.
As long as people are behaving in a way that doesn't cause harm to themselves, doesn't cause harm to others, there's no destruction of property, whether private or public, and people are generally, in good form, then there shouldn't be an issue at all.
When it comes to local laws in Qatar, it seems that things are going to be a little more relaxed during the World Cup. But that still leaves so many questions about exactly which laws are going to be enforced and how.
That's the thing about this World Cup. No one quite knows how it's going to unfold, and a lot of different people have a lot of different takes on it. But perhaps what's sometimes been lost in all the discussions around Qatar as hosts is another discussion about the significance of the World Cup being held in the Middle East for the first time.
هذا بالعكس فخر لنا وللشعب العربي كله يعني قام كأس العالم على أراضي عربية.
حمسة للحدث اللي بيصير والناس اللي بيجون والمباريات اللي بتصير. أكيد ناس كثير تحب المباريات، فنفسنا نشوف ودنا نشوف شعور الناس في قطر إن شاء الله.
Have you been to a football match before?
بصراحة لا، أول مرة.
Yeah.
We're obviously very proud that FIFA is going to be in an Arab country.
As a person coming from the Middle East, we're talking back in 2010, I was genuinely very, very happy for a country in the Middle East to be able to host this mega sporting event, to showcase our culture, so that for once I think the Arab world would be associated with what we really like, joy, festivities, and kind of steer away from the perception of the Arab world being wars, refugees, terrorism.
Football has deeper roots here than has often been acknowledged, and I think this tournament is really an opportunity to begin to kind of explore that history a little bit more and to see the way that the game has been truly globalized. There has to be a little bit more of an acknowledgement that football specifically is not the domain of sort of one culture or one country or one region.
The World Cup final will take place in this stadium on December 18th. It's also Qatar's National Day, and that's no coincidence. For Qatar, this tournament is about showcasing itself to the world, and they're hoping the world likes what it sees.